Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Simple Talk podcast from Redgate Software. I'm Steve Jones. I run SQL Server Central and I work at Redgate. And today I'm here alone. Well, not alone, but I don't have any of the other Redgate people here with me. But I do have Lee Brownhill, who actually had contacted me and asked to be on the podcast. So, Lee, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. So I'm Lee Brownhill, and I'm a principal cloud DBA. I work with various clients at the place I work, helping optimize both Azure and AWS workloads in the cloud. I work for a managed DBA service and consultancy with a deep specialization within the SQL Server world. And my passion has always lay within optimization and automation within the SQL Server world. That's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay, so you're like a lot of us that just you go to work and you're trying to make SQL Server run faster and efficiently for other people, right? I guess
and cheaper.
And cheaper is a big deal in the cloud these days, for sure. So we were chatting earlier. Actually, we were chatting quite a bit earlier, and Lee mentioned that part of what he had done this year was he wanted to give back to the community. He wanted to start do some blogging and think about speaking, and so that was part of your impetus to get on the show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you want to give back?
Yeah, well, based on a few events I attended last year, I got to speak to some of the people that one can end up putting on a bit of a pedestal in the data community, whether that you've followed their work over the years on blogs and newsletters, or you've actually watched a lot of their sessions and pre-cons. So I actually got to have some real good conversations with some of those people last year at a couple of events. And one thing hit me that it's going to sound ridiculous to say out loud, but they're actually just people at the end of the day. And the fact that the only difference is with those people is their levels of dedication and knowledge around a topic and their commitment to understanding that inside out. So I thought, well, if they can do that, well, maybe I could have a go and actually start giving back to the community for a change. A community that's given me so much over the years and really helped shape my career at times. So I decided this was the year I was going to try and give back to the community more than I've ever done.
I mean, it's fantastic. I wish I was one of those people last year.
You might have
met you and said,
I've not left any names.
No, it was interesting because a few days ago I was speaking at an event and I was trying to explain something with AI technology, and a lot of people were kind of apprehensive and tentative, and they were a little bit worried about it. You could see it in their faces and the questions. And I always try to remind them when I'm doing this that I'm not smarter than them, right? Like, it's not that I have any innate talent in any special way, but I just work at it and I've just spent time doing it.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm just further ahead than they are in the journey, but not only because of time, right? For not any other reason.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it kind of came to fruition in my mind when I was on my way back from an event, and I think I was on the train, and I think I was working on a blog post, and I journal a lot to keep things structured in my mind after things like that. So it kind of all came to fruition, and I just realized that maybe I could start to give back, because everybody's got their own unique opinion on things and their own unique take on things and have been through different experiences. And I think the more we can share that, it's only going to help us all move in a better direction.
I completely agree. Like, I think it is important to have different voices and different ways of presenting things. Years ago, I met some of the Stack Overflow guys and had a little bit of an argument with them because they wanted this canonical answer to every question. So, if somebody asked this, it's this answer. And if they ask a different question, it's a different answer.
Yeah.
And, my view is always there's different ways that we present and say things, and there's different reasons why we choose an approach. And I like to have different voices explaining it, because
for sure,
sometimes people hear one voice differently than another.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you've met some speakers that you go, they taught me so much. I realized I really like this. And then you met some speakers where you're like, I don't quite like their approach or their tone or something. Right.
Yep. Certainly different levels.
So it's always a challenge.
I don't know what the term would be, sort of ones that resonate more with me.
Yeah.
And I think that's just that's just a personal preference. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, they're not wrong, but there are certain people that are able to convey these sometimes quite complex topics, right? In a way that I can understand them, and you do get that little light bulb moment. So it's really interesting how it's almost like, I don't know if it's to do with frequencies or something.
It could be. I think sometimes, well, so I really believe, I do a lot of coaching with kids and others, and I really believe too that sometimes you have to be ready to hear it. So sometimes somebody catches you at the right point in time. And so having those different voices putting out the information at different points in time always helps. But I do think there's a little bit of personal preference, like the way somebody explains something sometimes is more useful. I'm sure you see that in the consultancy world, that sometimes you say something and it's not that it's different than what an employee said, but you present it in a different way and you have a little different reputation, right? You have a little different impact just from who you are.
Exactly that. And I think also I spent initially in my career, when I was trying to convey these topics to non-technical people, which you will invariably have to do at times in your career, I was always feeling like I was falling short on getting the point across. And I realized quite quickly I was going too far down rabbit holes with the technicalities of things. And they don't always want to necessarily know that. What they want to know is the outcome in real life business terms. And I've spent a lot of time trying to get better at that, at what does this change mean? Because I'm a big fan of only making changes if it's actually going to, the end user is going to notice something, right? You know, nobody's going to care if you say, well, I've dropped page life expectancy by whatever metric, and nobody, you know, nobody can see the difference. What does that actually mean in business terms? And I think I have to always remind myself of what does it actually do from a business perspective? What is it achieving from a business perspective? Rather than going down this cool feature of SQL that I've read about, and you know.
Yeah. No, you know, it is really interesting. Like I didn't meet, but I read from one of the computer science pioneers, like some programmer that had said, you know, really, I think you should study a lot about communication and critical thinking. So literature and English and things like that, more so, or maybe even as much as computer science, because that communication skill and learning to work with people in different ways and to express an idea that you want to convey, or to understand what somebody else is trying to convey, are really important skills. And I think it's easy to ignore those skills.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, especially in the consultancy world, where from one call to another, you could be speaking from somebody who wants to know the technicalities, like an architect of some sort, or you could be speaking to a non-technical person. You have to constantly flip-flop between these sort of audiences, for want of a better word, and being able to convey that across in a way that's meaningful for that audience, I think, is a skill that I'm still learning how to improve. And it really interests me, actually, how to get better at that. And I experiment and I try different things, and I try and say, well, did that work? Did this work? That didn't work so well. So next time I'll do this. And I'm constantly trying to refine how to, it's a funny thing, actually. The more I've developed in my career technically, the more I realize how important these skills are now. And I know there's a term, soft skills, but I don't know if I necessarily like that term. But yeah, the soft skills are, if not more important than the technical skills a lot of the time.
They really are, right? Because I think that many people have the technical skills, but the soft skills are often lacking. And I think a lot of the challenges we face in software sometimes come about because we don't always listen clearly, and we don't learn how to receive an idea, right, with active listening, convey it back, and verify that it is the same thing, right? We want to make it this technical thing, right? Like this will run in 2 milliseconds or something, rather than, am I actually capturing what they care about, you know, and producing that. So it's interesting, as you've been doing this for the last year, I think, because you've been blogging more, but not speaking yet, right? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to get up to a point where I'm ready to pull the trigger. And I was talking to Ben Weissman on one of his little podcasts he does, the Meeting Data Friends, and I was talking to him about this, and he said, well, we do a New Stars of Data event every year, so maybe that will be the one to sort of pick up, because I've got a lot of topics I could see myself talking about. I just need to pull the trigger really and get it submitted.
We have to do it. All right. So SQL Bits is, you have like 6 or 7 months here. So
yes, I'm hoping to be a helper on that one again though. So we'll see.
No, you gotta submit to speak. You can do both.
Well, maybe I could do a bit of both, because there were people dual wielding in that sense last time. So
yeah, I should do that. All right. So let me ask you this: do you think that the journaling you do, and then trying to push that back into blogging, where you actually put it out there for people, is that helping you in your job convey ideas or present them?
Absolutely. It really is, because it's making me, I think it's a really unappreciated skill, taking a very complex topic, and there are obviously people in the data community who are fantastic at this, taking a very complex, big wielding topic and really breaking it down to its core components to get that point across clearly. I think that's such a skill, and it's the thing I find hardest, quite frankly, because I naturally want to be quite verbose and going to this setting and why this is like this and why that's like that. But people don't want to read that. People want to understand the core concepts a lot of the time, in my experience. Well, that's what I look for a lot of the time in blog posts. I want to understand the core concepts and what that looks like. So the temptation to be incredibly verbose and just put too much detail is always there. So I think it's, again, refining what you're actually communicating out to a real sort of undiluted point, I think, is the real skill at hand there.
It is. I will say, from 20 some years of working with authors and trying to help them produce content, that focus is very challenging.
Yes.
That, right? Like if I said, Lee, hey, how do I set up a VM in Azure, right, for average server I'm moving up there? Like, I don't really need you to go, well, there's this AZ command line with all these parameters, and you can set the different things. And by the way, if you download it, you can also decide about bicep or not bicep. You can, go to the resource manager. You can pre-built images, or you can customize. Like, I don't need all of that, right? Like, in some sense, I need you to make some decisions for me and curate what knowledge I need and give it to me. And then what I struggle to get people to do is to then go, okay, how do I decide which disks? Well, that's kind of a separate topic from building a VM in Azure, right? Like it's related, but it's separate. And so I appreciate where you are, because it took me a while to learn that as well. And I'm constantly coaching people like, focus on the thing you do.
It's really tempting to just go down these rabbit holes, and you have to bring yourself back.
So let me ask you this: do you have any tricks for how you keep yourself focused? Have you built anything over the last year that's helped you?
Yeah, I think that there was a blogger I asked, actually, and I just asked directly the question about how do you write blog posts in such a succinct way, in such a clear way. And the advice I got was to keep rereading what you've written. Keep rereading it. So just before you're about to pull that trigger, sit on it for perhaps 24 hours, then reread it the next day, and keep rereading your work. And it kind of works, because you start to see little plot holes. You start to see little bits of duplication that are not needed. You start to see, really editing your own work realistically, and almost the bit of delay in time between those edits almost gives you not fresh eyes, but certainly different eyes compared to the ones you read it with yesterday, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Like so I've always recommended people, Stephen King wrote a book called On Writing.
He's one of my favorite authors, and I've read it. I love the book.
But he talks about, part of the book is about his story, but part of the book is about how he approaches writing. And he, along with many other authors, have always said, like, should write something, put it away for a little while, and come back to it so that you see it, because you change your frame of reference when you do that, and so it becomes more helpful. I think for me, the thing I always try to do is, usually when I write a blog post or when I do a presentation, I try to have that 1 or 2 sentences that explain what I'm doing.
Right.
And then I reread that over and over. So,
okay.
I always solve it, right? The first 2 paragraphs, somewhere in there, you have to explain to me why I should continue to read. Like, what am you actually going to tell me?
Yeah.
And the same thing for an abstract for his talk, that I usually stick that in the notes of my first slide. And I go back and refer to it, because it is easy to get scope creep and just start adding things that aren't really what you're trying to do.
Exactly, yeah. And we do that with, I've been guilty of that with even projects where, like you said, Steve, they will, the client may ask for X, and you end up starting to put all these bells and whistles on around it, and you think, well, hold on, they didn't even ask for that. So.
Yeah, that's why the cloud bills are so high. People like you are causing problems with too much stuff. All right. Let me just switch just a little bit. So you mostly do Azure, I think you said, right? Like, you do AWS and Azure.
That's where predominantly my experience lies.
Is that a preference thing? Is that your client base? Is it a happenstance?
It's happenstance, realistically, I think, because I think between the two, AWS has got a larger sort of user base or client base. But right. I think it's happenstance, because it just happens the roles I've worked in have been I've always
Azure
work to do, so that's where the majority of my experience has ended up being.
Do you prefer one over the other?
That's an unfair question, because Azure is my comfort sort of zone. I know where to go with Azure, where I'm still. I haven't got anywhere near the same level of experience with AWS. And I think, like with a lot of things, it's the right tool for the right job at the right time, whichever one, you end up going for. And there are things in Azure that are done better, in my opinion, compared to AWS, and vice versa in some ways. There are things in AWS that you think, oh, it'd be really cool to have that same level of functionality, or that same exact feature, for example. But yeah, I mean, my preference would be, from a selfish point of view, would be the Azure, because I can get a lot more done a lot quicker in Azure at the moment than I can in AWS.
And quick is always a factor, I think, that influences. So I'm curious, like, what things do you think, like, what's an example of something you think is better in Azure than AWS, or vice versa?
Well, I probably will get shot down for this one, but I do find the user interface significantly better in Azure.
I would agree completely.
I find it a bit of a there's a lot to take in with Azure. It's almost like you got a lot more detail just there, which is probably, once you get to a certain level within AWS, is really handy. I find but the thing is, it comes back to, again, personal preference, right? Because there are people that within my own team will argue the opposite way around to that point that I've just made. So I think it's almost what works for you, again, sort of thing.
It may be. I guess for me, like, I tend to do more stuff in Azure as well, but when I've done stuff in AWS, I find the documentation to be really erratic and not as consistent as Microsoft. And like, each team in AWS, and maybe Amazon, but certainly in AWS, kind of adopts, I hate to say their own style, but they kind of just do things, and there's a lot of sparseness in there.
Right.
Whereas in Azure, I find a lot more richer documentation, even though obviously both can be out of date pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge with both platforms, realistically, because there's the level of change on both platforms because of the nature of the cloud. I think it's almost an impossible job keeping up to date and on top of everything, right?
Really is. Yeah. I just have found the bar of trying to learn stuff in AWS to be harder, even if I'm doing things that are very Microsoft data platform centric. It's just it's annoying. The thing, it also feels like in Azure they bundle a bunch of stuff together. Like, if you go to deploy a resource, they bundle a bunch of stuff into there. Whereas in AWS they expect you to choose all the things you really want.
So, for example, you choose a VM in Azure, and it automatically to get you a network card, for example, right?
Yeah, like you do a Synapse workspace, right? And I would get a network card, I would get a storage account, I would get a log analytics account. Like I would just get a bunch of stuff wrapped around what I think would just be, I just need a database thing, and then tell me how much storage, right? But it allocates a bunch of resources.
Okay.
And it feels like AWS is slightly cleaner, but it's also, if I want anything extra, I have to remember to do that myself.
Right. Yes.
You know, so yeah, I don't know. Like I find a lot of stuff is more comfortable, I think, from the Microsoft space in Azure than it is in AWS, even though like we use EC2 and S3 constantly at Redgate, and I find those to be really rock solid and good. Whereas I find like the blob storage and stuff in Microsoft in Azure to be a little bit like inconsistent, like it's weird. Right? Like in S3 I can mount stuff as SMB, I can do all kinds of stuff, and in Azure it's very like blob storage can't be SMB, file storage can be SMB. It's just there's some weird artificial limitations, you know.
Yes, I've seen those.
So all right. So you don't want to take any GCP?
No, nothing GCP related yet. Weirdly, I used to work at a role where they had other products running on GCP, but it was never an area I got into, unfortunately.
And you guys are you're UK based, right? So is most of your work and clients UK based?
Yes, predominantly at the moment, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I do find in the US, GCP has been in the last year making a push. I can see a bunch of people moving to GCP.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the US because that company where I knew they were using GCP elsewhere was actually a US company. It's in a previous role. So majority of their products, in fact, actually ran on GCP, and they purchased where I was working. So we kind of got, brought in.
Right.
And we were using Azure Managed Instances and things like that. So which bring their own fun and games.
yeah, I've done very little GCP, so I don't have an opinion there. All right. So last week, I know we chatted a little bit. We're trying to schedule things. We're late September now, right now. You were in London for an event, and I know you said you're doing more events. What was last week in London?
So last week I attended Big Data London, and it's one that I've never attended until last week. And it was one my partner actually recommended, saying she thought it might be good because my partner also works in the data space, and she recommended it to me. So I went and had a look, and it was really, really big in every sense. There was so much there. There were so many people there, but there were some good speakers. I saw a few good speakers who I've seen before now, and it's had to catch up with a few of those as well. So it's always good. And it's the best thing, like we said earlier on, Steve, it's one of the best things about these events, realistically, is keeping up with the connections, catching up with people, seeing how everyone's getting on. And that's the thing I enjoy most about them now. And if I can see a good session or two as well, even better. But it's really good fun.
Yeah, I think we always talk about the hallway track being the after session or between session conversation with people. So is there anything that stood out in the big data world to you that you would go, maybe this is interesting, maybe I should spend time here, or other people should look at this?
Not one thing in particular. I mean, obviously everything was dominated by AI, which
AI is everywhere.
Is a moot point at this point, really. But the thing which surprised me was just the size of the hallway track and whatnot and everything going on. There was almost I only went for the one day. It was on for 2 days, and there was almost too much to see in one day. It was really difficult to get around and see everything there was to see because you get tired as well after a bit. They're quite tiring events, such things, walking around all day. So it was just I was really shocked and surprised at just the sheer scale of it, really.
Well, is there anything that struck you as new or interesting that came out of it, like a piece of technology, solution?
There was one theme that was quite interesting to me, and I'm obviously not super heavy into the data scene and the data world in that sense, in the same sense that a lot of people there were. But it's this kind of this concept of sort of decoupling and bringing things together, and it kind of goes in circles, right? It's almost about like, and I think Steph Locke was doing a talk on data ops, which kind of rang true with this a bit as well, about how we've gone through these phases of deconstruct everything and have everything, not microservice, but have everything having dedicated singular small little tasks, to going back to this big monolithic sort of task. And that could be anything. It could be, back in the day, it would have been a sys package doing all the one thing in one go. But just as a concept, this sort of decoupling and sort of denormalizing the processes, and we've gone back to almost having these monolithics, but not in the sense of the true sense, but more like just a gateway to do. You can see it with the AI side of things. You throw what your request now at an AI gateway, and it will do the work for you behind the scenes. So we're almost like going in these cycles, in my opinion, from my quite naive opinion about the data world, about going from these really unstructured ways of working to a bit more of a structured, all-encompassing solution again.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I think the I think you're probably close to my age, but we've seen it similar. Like the mainframe world was everything all together, really heavyweight, constrictive applications that did all of a thing, to the client server world, the 3T architecture, then going back, I think, and building kind of websites as a monolith type thing, right, for a lot of applications. And then we had this service oriented architecture stuff. And, it's always interesting because I think that everything is easy when you know how to do it.
Yes.
And so I think it's easy to look at other people and go, oh man, they've done a great job doing that thing. I should be doing it like them. Because it seems like they're having more success in building something than I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That,
And I think maybe you see this in the performance tuning world, right? As you optimize SQL Server, is that it's little things that make a difference and make it work better, and it's your approach, not your choice of technology or anything else, right? Like
exactly there. Yeah, and there's no clear definites. I see a lot of blog posts, or not blog posts, but LinkedIn posts, especially saying X is the best way to do everything. Full stop. Always. And I don't believe there's any that really holds up in any sort of any tech world, really. There's never one clear, because none of us would be needed if that was the case, right?
No,
there's never one answer to everything.
I met a guy that was convinced Spotify was doing everything right. He's like, all our apps and all our databases should be like how Spotify runs things. I'm like, they have a very different problem space than what I deal with a lot of times in my clients.
Exactly.
That's not, what they do doesn't really matter. Like, it's not that important if it doesn't.
And I understand the need for these, definitive statements, because we all want things to be clean and work like, in a normal way, repeated way. But that's not life, realistically, and there's always going to be some slight nuance to kind of almost every project we undertake. Well, it has been in my experience anyway.
Yeah, I know, I agree. Right now, to me, a lot of times it's where does your experience lie, because cost of labor and the cost of retraining, reskilling people is high, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of times I see customers wanting to like leave SQL Server to Postgres or Oracle to Postgres something and do something different. I'm like, you're not going to save any money for a very, very long time. Like, it's just what you're undertaking is a massive thing.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I haven't seen a lot of big data stuff in the last few years, and I wonder if AI will change that. I went to a conference last year called Small Data, which was really interesting. I'm going to go back in November because it was kind of a fascinating, different way to look at the world, and think about how we approach analytics reporting and lots of stuff we do. So, all right. So I think it's 2025, right? And we've been here for a little while, so we have to talk a little bit about AI. What have you done with AI, or are you avoiding it?
I'm not avoiding it, but I'm also keen to see where things pan out, because again, coming back to definites, people are saying you should definitely spend your next, however much learning and training budget you've got or time, you need to spend it on doing this or this only, or this and this only. So what I've actually been utilizing AI for is or are common sort of admin tasks realistically at the moment, which I've found to be a great time saver to allow me to do the more in-depth SQL things. So
what's an example? Like, what have you done?
So, like, for example, I've worked in the past a lot within, systems such as Atlassian, Jira, and things like that, where you've got to have this checklist done in a certain way. Whereas, like, case in point, an example, I get called into a P1 situation where SQL Server's down. I just throw things into the AI client now as I'm doing things, so just about my process. And then it allows me to just say, wrap up. Once I've solved the problem, I can wrap it up quite nicely in a report and just give me a report of all the actions I took and the diagnosis steps I took, and write it up in a nice report for me. And there you go. And whereas I'd had to spend time collating that in a clean, concise manner before. And obviously there's a lot of proofreading needing done and checking, but that's a great example where I can just kind of throw things I'm trying at, and just as and it'll just produce a report for me at the end of it once the chaos is over, and things like that, and just general. I need an Excel function to do this, and so I don't have to go back through all my notes and find all my old notes about this crazy long, once in a lifetime Excel function that I used to have to need. I can just say I need an Excel function to do this, for example. So, and even basic sort of DMV queries now, I don't need to remember the names, and I don't think anyone should ever have really remembered the names of all the DMV's SQL Server. I'm sure there are people out there, but
yes and no, right? I think you have to recognize some things that, like, you don't really care if SQL text is in sysdmv exec request or sysdmv query plan. Like, you don't care where it is.
All I want is the content of it, right?
Yeah, but you do have to have some idea of what I'm trying to do, what I'm looking at.
Of course.
Right? So that there. That's a fascinating use for AI. Like, I hadn't thought of that, but it does remind me. I was watching a kid on an airplane earlier this year work on his PhD thesis. And he was kind of doing what you're describing, in that he was, he presented some stuff, and then he said, all right, so what should I do next? Like, what's the outline look like? Yep. And he's kind of talking with AI like it's a colleague, trying to just keep him on track.
Yeah, I definitely use it as almost like a personal office assistant, just to take notes for me, almost as I'm doing my tasks. I can use it just to take notes for me, and then collate it in a nice report that all I have to do then is proofread it and amend it here and there a bit. So
the P1 thing is a great idea, right? Because I can just go, hey, I did this, or should I try this, or this worked, this didn't work, and because it has, I hate to say memory, but it has some context across this conversation. It can summarize that stuff later, which is actually a great way. I may have to try that, because I was trying to fix something for SQL Saturday the other day, and I kept messing up this date calculation. I was like, I should have just put all this in an AI and just go, I'm doing this. What am I doing wrong? Like, what's going on?
Because I've got the process that I know about logically how I would tackle that P1 and go through the various steps and just rule out this, and you eventually will get to the answer, hopefully. But what I don't need to be spending time on is just having somebody making my own notes for what I went through for the root cause analysis and things like that, where I can just put my steps that I did. I'm not asking for the steps, but I'm just saying I did this, and then it brings a nice little tally up at the end. And I find things like that. It's funny because I'm not actually using it for a lot of specifically technical things at the moment yet. I'm still very much learning about it and understanding what it can do, what it can't do, what's safe to use it for at the moment. I'm still very much so. The things I am using it at the moment are very admin-y kind of tasks at the moment, and it's really helping me on that side of things.
It would be interesting for you to take one of those reports, like if you had another P1, and drop it in there as context and go, hey, this is what I did last time. I have a similar issue. What should I do? What worked and what didn't work? You know what I mean? Because I could also see that same type of idea might be, you know, as I'm building out a resource, like say I'm building a VM, you could say, here's what I did last time. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm doing. What have I forgotten? What have I not done? Does this look close? Right? Like there's a lot of, because I think there's a lot of things around the details in a policy that AI is good at catching deviations from. Or recognizing pattern stuff. So
I have used it for a bit of troubleshooting, but I only ever use it for troubleshooting when it's outside of my core skill set, realistically. Not that I think I could do it better than, you know, AI can do SQL Server, even though there are areas where I definitely know I can, because I've seen some horror stories online and whatnot. But so, for example, you know, we work in the cloud in a lot, obviously, this day and age. And very often I will have to sort of know more about networking than I necessarily know, for example. But and I'm not, nobody's coming to me to create, you know, a VNet, and they should.
You don't know /24s. You don't know what that
exactly. And it really helps when I get sort of at my depth on topics that aren't my core skill set around, you know, obviously data and SQL. When I do have to venture into those and be a bit more self-service from my own point of view, it can really help me with like a checklist of what at least the concepts I need to understand and what I need and why I need them.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I've used it for a few things. Like I had a friend that was trying to fix or establish some foreign key stuff. And he's like, you know, this is just work. Like it's hard to do this stuff. And I was like, you should ask the AI. And so we like point the AI at his database and say, you know, hey, where should we have foreign keys? We don't, because it's easy to not really know that, right? And it's and you might have knowledge that says, well, I know this and this are related, even though they're not close to names. But the AIs actually find a lot of stuff that you might not think about as well.
Exactly. And like you say, it's just got all that wealth of, you know, knowledge that it's gathered together. And I think to be able to say you are always going to know more than the AI is not necessarily true or factually correct, because, you know, it's got so much data it's working. The key thing is the context and the translation of that data, right, at the situation at hand. So I use it cautiously, and I use it a lot for admin sort of tasks at the moment, but I'm still learning and reading a lot about it and trying to figure out, where it's all going to end up, really, because, you know, if from one post to another, you can kind of, it's going to save the world and it's going to do everything for us. And then the next post you read will be a bit more rooted in reality, perhaps, about where it is actually useful and what it can actually do. So I'm waiting for the dust to settle on these hot takes at the moment.
All right. Favorite AI? What do you normally use?
I use Copilot day in, day out, because and there's no other reason for it was there, and I've had more success compared to sort of ChatGPT with doing some of these admin tasks. So
interesting. Yeah,
I'm a big advocate so far for Copilot.
And I assume you're probably using the default model, so it's probably still a GPT model, but it has context.
Oh yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how about you, Steve? Which one do you prefer?
You know, I lean towards a sonnet model, the Claude from Anthropic, the sonnet models. I've
heard so many good things.
When I do Copilot, if I do non-SQL stuff, I think it works pretty well. Like I have it fix formatting, right? Do some of that non-SQL stuff. When I use it in SQL code areas, you know, in VS Code or even in Azure, it seems to lean a little bit to MySQL sometimes if it doesn't quite have the context. Like it just does. I haven't been thrilled with how it works, especially the agent side of things. Whereas I find the Sonnet one to just be a little more helpful.
Interesting. Okay.
You know, so it's one of those things I still experiment on, and you know, the Redgate guys really like the Gemini models, which I really have not played with.
Okay.
So it's on my list to kind of do some more comparisons. You know, a lot of times I do something in Copilot and I'll do something in Claude, and I'll just kind of see how it looks different.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a really good way to approach it, right? The comparison, see what each one does differently. And I do flick between a few, but I'm a lot of the time I'm just there in Copilot because it's there, right? It's just right there on my
Yeah,
task.
yeah, it's right there. Yeah, I think just like working with another human, another coworker, you have to build some trust and a bond to work with them, or you don't. You know, and you have to find somebody else. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. All right. All right, so you're going to submit for SQL bits and new stars of data. We know that.
Exactly that.
Any recommendations for people that want to get started blogging or speaking or work in the cloud? Any advice?
Well, one thing I would like to point is your set of blog posts you were doing, Steve, about, I thought it was such a cool idea about just trying to get people into blogging and just blogging about random topics that you were perhaps encountering, and you were doing this sort of beginner's guide to blogging, where you were just blogging about, you can literally blog about anything that you found. Well, you can blog about anything, obviously, but I always find if it's something I genuinely found interesting, or I found like I had to overcome an obstacle to get to the solution, and I had to think about things that I would never think about before, or it's pushed my boundaries a bit, my knowledge. Those are the things I really find are the easiest things to blog about, post the situation, obviously. Once you've actually got over to the solution, I think those are the best ones. It's just blog what interests you mostly.
Well, good. Yeah, I'm glad you like this. That was actually Ed Leighton Dick's idea. He's a consultant in the States, and he had this idea one year to do this, and I thought it was fantastic. So I also find like if I'm struggling for ideas there, then I'm like, I'm not doing enough technical work, and I'm not really stretching, like I'm not experimenting and trying to get things done. So.
And as an avid reader, I really enjoy your word of the days as well, because I always find a new word.
Those are interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed them. I have a lot of friends that enjoy them, but they were kind of like, they're kind of depressing. Some of them are. So I was like, all right, I'll have to mix them up with something that's less sorrowful, I guess.
Yeah.
So, well, good. Well, Lee, hey, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
And hopefully everybody else has too. Where's your blog, so we can let people know?
So you can find my blog at leebrownhill.com.
Okay. All right. We'll stick that in the show notes as well. And then look for Lee around the UK at events. I'm sure he'll be at some more. And hopefully we'll see him speaking at SQL Bits is it May next year?
April.
April. Is it April?
April. Yeah.
All right. End of April, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you got to work on a presentation. You got a few months to get going.
I hear you, Steve. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lee. And hopefully everybody's enjoyed this. And please link, share it, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll talk to you again soon. So thanks and goodbye.
Bye.